A jealous Mafia boss, a loyal secretary, and a dangerously beautiful emerald dress that pushed a cold-hearted criminal over the edge. What starts as a possessive interrogation in a penthouse office spirals into a deadly game of betrayal blackmail and an underworld secret no one saw coming. Listen closely. It was 5:45 p.m. on a rain-swept Friday inside the glass-walled penthouse of Luciano Holdings in downtown Boston. To the financial district, the company was a legitimate titan in real estate and international logistics. To the criminal underworld, it was the heavily fortified nervous system of the Luciano crime syndicate, overseen by a man who ruled his empire with a scalpel rather than a sledgehammer, Nathaniel Luciano. Nathaniel was a man of terrifying stillness. At 34, he had inherited a fractured Mafia family and ruthlessly stitched it back together through sheer intellect and calculated violence. He was a man who noticed everything, a misplaced ledger, a nervous tick from an underboss, a discrepancy in a shipping manifest. But for the last 3 years, the only thing he had truly been studying was his executive secretary, Camilla Ford. Camilla was usually a ghost of corporate efficiency. She blended into the cold mahogany and brushed steel of the executive suite, hiding her striking features behind conservative navy pantsuits, thick-rimmed tortoise-shell glasses, and a tightly coiled chignon. She never asked questions about the men with broken noses who visited after hours. She never flinched when Nathaniel's temper shattered the boardroom windows. She was his perfect, untouchable right hand. Or so he thought. The soft hum of the private elevator signaled the end of the workday. Nathaniel, nursing a glass of 20-year-old Macallan, stepped out of his inner office to drop a file on Camilla's desk. He froze. The woman standing by the coat rack was not his conservative secretary. Camilla had let her hair down dark waves, cascading over bare porcelain shoulders. She was wearing an emerald green silk dress. It wasn't just a dress. It was a weapon. The fabric clung to every curve she had spent 3 years hiding, plunging daringly low in the back and featuring a slit that revealed the long, elegant line of her leg. She was adjusting a delicate gold necklace, her lips painted a deep, dangerous crimson. A heavy, suffocating silence descended on the room. The rhythmic drumming of the rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows seemed to amplify the sudden, violent spike in Nathaniel's pulse. He felt a primal, possessive rage flare up in his chest, so hot and unexpected, it nearly knocked the breath out of him. He was a man who owned entire city blocks, politicians and police precincts, yet the sight of his secretary dressed for another man made him feel like a starving animal. Camilla turned, catching his dark, intense gaze. For a fraction of a second, her eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly masked it with her usual polite detachment. "I left the quarterly projections on your desk, Mr. Luciano," she said, her voice steady, though she gripped her leather clutch a little too tightly. "Is there anything else you need before I leave for the weekend?" Nathaniel slowly set his whiskey glass down on the edge of her desk. He closed the distance between them with predatory grace, his custom-tailored charcoal suit hiding the lethal tension in his muscles. He stopped just inches from her, close enough to catch the scent of her perfume jasmine and something darkly sweet. His eyes swept over the emerald silk, his jaw clenching so hard it ached. "Who are you planning to kiss after work in that dress?" The jealous Mafia boss asked his secretary, his voice a low, gravelly threat that vibrated in the quiet room. Camilla swallowed hard, taking a subtle half-step back until her shoulders met the cool glass of the window. I have a personal engagement, Mr. Luciano. It's Friday." "A personal engagement," Nathaniel repeated, tasting the bitter words. He leaned in closer, his dark eyes boring into hers. "You've worked for me for 3 years, Camilla. You've never taken a sick day. You've never left before 6. And you have certainly never worn something designed to make a man lose his mind. "It's just a dinner," she whispered, her gaze dropping to the knot of his silk tie. "Where?" he demanded the Mafia Don, bleeding through the polished CEO facade. "That is my private business," she replied, finding a sudden burst of courage. She met his eyes a spark of defiance, breaking through her usual submissive demeanor. "Have a good weekend, Nathaniel." She slipped past him, the silk of her dress brushing agonizingly against his hand, and stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut, leaving Nathaniel standing alone in the quiet penthouse. He stared at the closed elevator doors, the scent of jasmine lingering in the air. The rational part of his brain told him to let her go, to remember that she was a civilian, an employee, and completely off-limits to a man with blood on his ledger. But the rational part of his brain had just been thoroughly silenced by the vision of that emerald dress. Nathaniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his encrypted phone. He dialed a single digit. "Rocco," Nathaniel said, his voice cold and flat. "Bring the SUV around to the loading dock. Now, we're following Miss Ford." The Boston streets were a blur of neon and rain as Nathaniel's black armored Escalade glided through the evening traffic. From the tinted back seat, Nathaniel watched the taillights of Camilla's rideshare. His mind was a storm of dark scenarios. Who was the man, a rival corporate executive? A soft-handed lawyer who didn't know the first thing about protecting a woman like her. "She's pulling up to Lockheed, boss," Rocco grunted from the driver's seat, referring to an exclusive subterranean lounge notorious for its strict privacy policies and heavy-hitting clientele. Nathaniel felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Lockheed wasn't a place for romantic first dates. It was a place where illicit deals were struck, where secrets were traded over $1,000 bottles of champagne. It was a place favored by the worst kind of predators in the city. "Park in the alley. Wait for my call," Nathaniel ordered, stepping out into the drizzle. He bypassed the line at the entrance. The burly bouncer at the door caught one glimpse of Nathaniel Luciano's face, swallowed nervously, and immediately unclipped the velvet rope. Nathaniel slipped into the dimly lit, cavernous lounge. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cigars, spilled bourbon, and hushed conversations. He moved like a shadow along the perimeter, his eyes scanning the plush leather booths until he spotted the emerald silk. Camilla was seated in a secluded corner booth. Across from her sat a man. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes, his exceptional memory instantly placing the face. It wasn't a lawyer or a civilian. It was Harrison Brooks. Brooks was a sleazy, mid-level underground loan shark and fixer who operated out of the South End. He was a known associate of the Russian syndicate, a man who built his meager wealth by exploiting desperate people, sinking his teeth into gambling addicts, and bleeding them dry. Nathaniel stopped dead in his tracks, hiding behind a marble pillar. The jealousy that had been burning inside him instantly froze, replaced by a chilling, razor-sharp clarity. Camilla wasn't on a date. She was in trouble. He watched, intently reading their body language. Brooks was leaning across the table, his eyes raking over Camilla's exposed shoulders with disgusting hunger. He was smiling a greasy, predatory grin. Camilla, however, looked entirely different from the defiant woman in the penthouse. Her posture was rigid, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her drink. There was no romance in her eyes, only a suffocating, desperate terror. Nathaniel edged closer, blending into the ambient noise of a nearby jazz band, straining to hear over the music. "Told you to wear something nice," Brooks was saying, his voice a slick sneer. "And I gotta say, Camilla, you clean up real well. Almost makes me want to forget the money." "I don't have the 200,000, Harrison." Camilla's voice was a strained whisper, tight with unshed tears. "My brother is an idiot. Tommy didn't know whose money he was taking at that poker game. I just need 1 more month to liquidate my savings." Brooks laughed, a harsh, grating sound. He reached across the table and grabbed her wrist. Camilla flinched, trying to pull away, but his grip was like a vice. You don't have a month, sweetheart? Brooks purred. The Russians want Tommy's kneecaps by Monday. But seeing you in this dress gives me an idea. You're Luciano's secretary, right? You have access to his accounts, his private safe. Camilla's eyes widened in horror. No, absolutely not. If I steal from Nathaniel Luciano, I'm dead. He'll kill me himself. If you don't, Brooks countered, squeezing her wrist until she gasped in pain. I'll kill your brother tonight, and then I'll sell you to the highest bidder to cover the debt. So what's it gonna be, Camilla? You're gonna be a good girl, go back to the office on Monday and get me my money. Behind the pillar, Nathaniel closed his eyes for a brief second. The pieces violently slammed into place. The conservative clothes, the overtime, the quiet desperation. She had been working herself to the bone to save a degenerate younger brother. And tonight, the beautiful emerald dress wasn't an invitation for a lover. It was armor. It was a desperate, humiliating attempt to play the part of a high roller to stall a monster in a desperate bid for her brother's life. She wasn't betraying him. She was protecting him by refusing to steal, even with a gun to her family's head. A terrifying calmness washed over Nathaniel. It was the exact state of mind he entered before he dismantled a rival cartel. He stepped out from behind the pillar. He walked slowly, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet, until he stood directly behind Harrison Brooks. Camilla saw him first. The color instantly drained from her face, her beautiful eyes going wide with pure, unadulterated shock. She stopped breathing. Brooks, noticing her expression, frowned. "What are you looking at?" Before the loan shark could turn his head, Nathaniel's large, heavy hand clamped down on the back of Brooks's neck like a steel trap. "She won't be going back to the office on Monday to steal from me, Harrison." Nathaniel's voice was a soft, deadly whisper that seemed to drop the temperature in the entire lounge. Brooks froze, the blood leaving his face as he recognized the voice of the most feared man in Boston. Nathaniel tightened his grip, his thumb pressing sadistically into a nerve on the loan shark's neck. He leaned down, speaking directly into Brooks's ear, his eyes locked onto Camilla's trembling form. "And if you ever touch my secretary again," Nathaniel continued his tone, conversational, but dripping with lethal intent, "I will personally ensure that they never find enough of you to bury." Let go of her wrist. Brooks snatched his hand back as if he had been burned, gasping for air as Nathaniel finally released his neck. The loan shark was trembling completely out of his depth. Nathaniel smoothly slid into the booth next to Camilla. He didn't look at the terrified man across the table. Instead, he turned his full attention to the woman beside him. He reached out his long fingers, gently brushing over the red marks blooming on her pale wrist where Brooks had grabbed her. His touch was shockingly tender, a stark contrast to the violence radiating from him seconds prior. "You look beautiful in this dress, Camilla," Nathaniel said softly, holding her stunned gaze. "Now, why don't you tell me exactly how much your brother owes this dead man walking?" Harrison Brooks looked as though all the blood had been siphoned from his veins. He sat frozen across the table, his eyes darting frantically between Nathaniel's impassive face and the heavy, custom-tailored suit that undoubtedly concealed a firearm. The ambient jazz music of Lorchid seemed to fade into a hollow, echoing distance, leaving only the terrifying, jagged sound of Brooks's own panicked breathing. 200,000, Mr. Luciano." Brooks finally stammered, the slick confidence he had wielded moments ago completely shattered. "It's a straightforward debt. The kid got in over his head at a high-stakes table in the South End. Victor Volkov's men were backing the game. I'm just the collector." Nathaniel didn't blink. He kept his large, warm hand draped protectively over Camilla's trembling fingers, anchoring her to reality. She was staring at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly beneath the emerald silk, her mind struggling to reconcile the coldly efficient CEO she knew with the lethal apex predator sitting beside her. "You are a scavenger, Harrison," Nathaniel said, his voice smooth, devoid of any shouting which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying. "A bottom feeder who operates on the scraps left behind by real men. But you made a fatal miscalculation tonight. You threatened something that belongs to me." Brooks swallowed audibly. "I didn't know, I swear to God, Mr. Luciano. If I knew she was under your protection—" "Quiet," Nathaniel commanded softly. The single word cracked like a whip. Brooks snapped his mouth shut. Nathaniel slowly reached into the inner breast pocket of his charcoal suit. Brooks flinched, bracing for a bullet, but Nathaniel merely withdrew a sleek silver money clip. He detached a single black card and tossed it onto the center of the mahogany table. It landed with a heavy, final thwack. "There is $500,000 available on that card," Nathaniel stated, his dark eyes finally locking onto the loan shark. "You will take it to Victor Volkov. You will tell him that Thomas Ford's debt is settled in full. And then, Harrison, you are going to pack a very small bag and leave Boston. If my men see your face within city limits after midnight tonight, they won't bother asking questions." "Do you understand?" Brooks's trembling fingers reached out and snatched the black card as if it were a lifeline. He nodded frantically, practically vibrating with the urge to flee. "Yes. Yes, absolutely. I'm gone. You won't ever see me again." "Get out of my sight," Nathaniel murmured. Brooks scrambled out of the booth, knocking over his expensive scotch in his haste, and practically ran toward the exit of the underground lounge. Nathaniel didn't watch him leave. His attention was entirely consumed by the woman sitting next to him. Camilla's adrenaline was crashing, leaving her dizzy and numb. The meticulously constructed armor of the emerald dress suddenly felt paper-thin. She looked down at her hands, ashamed, terrified, and utterly overwhelmed. "Nathaniel, Mr. Luciano I," she started, her voice breaking. "I will pay you back, every single cent. They can dock my salary for the next 10 years, I don't care. I just couldn't let them kill Tommy." "Look at me, Camilla," Nathaniel ordered gently. She forced her eyes up to meet his. Instead of the cold, calculating fury she expected to find, she saw a dark, burning intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "We are leaving," he said, standing up and offering her his hand. Camilla hesitated for a fraction of a second before placing her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and unapologetically possessive as he guided her out of the smoky depths of Lorchid and back up to the rain-slicked Boston streets. Rocco was waiting by the armored escalade, holding an oversized black umbrella. He opened the rear door without a word, his stoic face betraying no emotion. Nathaniel ushered Camilla into the cavernous, leather-scented interior of the SUV before sliding in beside her. The heavy doors closed with a solid, hermetic thud, shutting out the noise of the city and the relentless drumming of the rain. The silence in the vehicle was heavy, charged with an electric tension. Camilla sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, staring blindly at the privacy partition, separating them from Rocco. "Why didn't you come to me?" Nathaniel finally asked, breaking the silence as the SUV merged onto the rain-swept highway. Camilla let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. "Come to you, and say what, excuse me, Mr. Luciano here, are the third-quarter earnings reports. And by the way, my degenerate younger brother owes the Russian Mafia $250,000. You are my employer. You demand perfection, discretion, and loyalty. Bringing syndicate warfare to your doorstep is grounds for immediate termination, to put it mildly." "You think I care about termination?" Nathaniel shifted in his seat, turning his entire body toward her. The streetlights, sweeping through the tinted windows, cast sharp, shifting shadows across his handsome, angular face. You were going to let a gutter rat like Brooks leverage you. You were going to let him look at you in that dress and treat you like a piece of collateral. It was the only play I had. Camilla fired back, her own frustration finally boiling over. I don't have an army of men in tailored suits, Nathaniel. I have a tiny savings account and a brother who doesn't know how to stop dealing from the bottom of the deck. I was trying to stall them. I was trying to survive. Nathaniel leaned closer, his voice dropping to a gravelly register. You don't have to survive on your own anymore. But you need to understand something, Camilla. This was never just about a poker debt. Camilla frowned, her anger momentarily derailed by confusion. What do you mean? Brooks said. Brooks is a pawn who doesn't know the full layout of the board, Nathaniel interrupted smoothly. 2 days ago, our cybersecurity team detected a breach at the South Boston shipping docks. Someone bypassed the manual locks on the foreman's office and walked away with a physical encrypted ledger. A ledger that details the exact arrival times, container numbers, and routing schedules for $300 million worth of untraceable European bearer bonds. Camilla's blood ran cold. She was intimately familiar with Luciano Holdings' logistics operations, though she was kept strictly away from the illicit side of the business. She knew what those bonds meant. They were the lifeblood of Nathaniel's European alliances. The Russians want those bonds, Nathaniel continued, his eyes locked onto hers. Viktor Volkov has been trying to crack my shipping routes for a year. He couldn't do it digitally, so he found a weak link on the ground. A kid who hangs around the docks looking for quick cash to feed his gambling habit. A kid who just happens to be the younger brother of my executive secretary. The horrifying realization hit Camilla like a physical blow. She pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Tommy stole the ledger. He didn't know what it was. Nathaniel said, his tone entirely devoid of sympathy for the boy, though his gaze remained fiercely protective of the woman. Volkov's men likely offered to wipe a small portion of his debt if he did them a favor, and fetched a specific file from a desk. But once Tommy handed it over, Volkov realized the leverage he truly had. He didn't just have the shipping routes, he had a direct exploitable line to you, and threw you away into my penthouse, into my personal safe. Brooks wasn't acting alone tonight. He was following Volkov's orders to turn you into an inside asset. Camilla felt the plush leather interior of the SUV spinning around her. She had thought she was drowning in a $200,000 puddle. In reality, she and her brother had been dragged into the middle of a multi-million-dollar syndicate war. They were going to force me to betray you, she whispered, the sheer magnitude of the trap paralyzing her. They were going to try, Nathaniel corrected, reaching out to gently trace the line of her jaw with his knuckles. His touch sent a shiver racing down her spine, a startling contrast of danger and comfort. But they underestimated one crucial detail. What? She breathed, mesmerized by the dark, hypnotic pull of his eyes. They underestimated how far I will go. Nathaniel murmured, his voice laced with a terrifying promise of violence, to protect what is mine. The armored Escalade glided to a halt past the colossal wrought-iron gates of a secluded Beacon Hill estate. Camilla had managed the logistics for this property, authorizing security upgrades, coordinating landscaping, routing private couriers, but stepping onto the cobblestone driveway felt like crossing into another dimension. This was Nathaniel's impenetrable fortress, a sprawling stone manor hidden from the city's prying eyes. We are not going back to your apartment, Nathaniel stated flatly, sensing the nervous tremor in her breath as Rocco opened the heavy door. Volkov knows your address. Until his syndicate is dismantled, you stay here. Camilla didn't possess the energy to argue. She stepped out into the biting Boston rain. Instantly, Nathaniel draped his heavy wool overcoat around her bare shoulders. The dark cedar and bergamot scent of him enveloped her, acting as a bizarrely comforting shield against the cold reality of her situation. He guided her up the sweeping steps into a breathtakingly grand foyer. Vaulted ceilings, imported marble, and dark oak paneling echoed with their footsteps. Dominic Nathaniel's ruthless underboss stepped out from the shadows, his tailored suit completely dry, his eyes sharp and assessing. "The perimeter is locked down, boss. 30 men on active rotation." Dominic reported, offering Camilla a brief, respectful nod. "We also secured Thomas Ford. Our sweepers pulled him out of a dive bar in Southie before the Russians could grab him. He's stashed in the waterfront bunker, completely unharmed." A fractured sigh of relief tore from Camilla's lips. She closed her eyes, the crushing weight of her brother's impending death finally lifting. "Keep him offline. No phones, no windows," Nathaniel ordered, his voice dropping to a lethal commanding register. "Now assemble the strike teams, Dominic. Viktor Volkov crossed an unforgivable line tonight by targeting my people. By dawn, I want every single Russian-backed port operation in this city burning. Sever his supply lines. Sink his shipments. I want him to know exactly who lit the match." "Understood," Dominic replied, turning on his heel to execute the order that would inevitably plunge the Boston underworld into a bloody, chaotic war. Nathaniel turned his attention back to Camilla. His hand rested on the small of her back as he guided her into a cavernous study. A roaring fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows over walls lined with rare, leather-bound books. He poured a generous measure of 20-year-old Macallan into a heavy glass, carrying it over and pressing it into her trembling hands. "Drink it. It will help clear the shock." Camilla took a slow sip, the amber liquid, burning a fiery, grounding trail down her throat. She looked up at him. He had discarded his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his crisp white shirt, revealing the intricate dark ink of syndicate tattoos snaking up his forearms. It was a stark, visual reminder of the violent world he ruled. "Why are you doing this, Nathaniel?" she asked softly, the whiskey loosening her tightly wound nerves. "You secured my idiot brother, paid off a massive debt, and just declared an all-out war on a rival syndicate. From a logical business standpoint, I am a catastrophic liability. You should have let me go." Nathaniel stood by the hearth, the firelight catching the sharp, harsh angles of his face. He watched her for a long, heavy moment. He watched the way the light danced over the emerald silk of her dress, the way his oversized coat dwarfed her frame, and the way her eyes held a defiant spark despite her fear. "You think this is about business?" he murmured, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He crossed the Persian rug with predatory grace, stopping directly in front of her. He gently took the whiskey glass from her fingers, setting it on the coffee table before leaning down, bracing his hands on the back of the sofa to trap her in his orbit. "For 3 years, Camilla." Nathaniel began, his dark gaze locked onto hers. "I have watched you hide your brilliance behind thick glasses and shapeless navy suits. I watched you handle my volatile temper, my relentless demands, and the shadows of my world with a grace that drove me insane. I told myself to keep my distance, that as long as you were my secretary, I was protecting you from the monster I am." He reached out, his knuckles lightly grazing her jawline, sending a violent shiver down her spine. But tonight, his jaw clenched, a muscle ticking, as the jealousy flared in his eyes again. "I saw you in this dress. I saw you dressed to kill, walking out into the night, and a rage so violent it blinded me took over. I thought you belonged to another man. Volkov gave me the excuse I was desperately waiting for. You are never going back to that desk. You are never hiding yourself again. If I'm not your secretary," she breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What am I?" "You are mine," Nathaniel declared. His mouth crashed down onto hers. There was no hesitation. It was a kiss fueled by 3 years of suppressed, agonizing restraint and the intoxicating adrenaline of impending war. Camilla gasped against his lips, but instead of pulling away, her hands instinctively reached up her fingers, burying themselves in his dark hair. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing heavily. He rested his forehead against hers, his hands gripping her waist fiercely. Volkov will bleed for touching your life, and when the smoke clears, you will be standing right beside me. Do you understand? Camilla looked into the eyes of the most lethal man in Boston. The fear was entirely gone, replaced by a dark, thrilling realization. She smiled, her crimson lips curving in the firelight. "Show me the ledger, Nathaniel," she whispered, her voice steady and resolute. "If we are going to burn his empire to the ground, I need to know exactly where to strike the matches. Artus." Did the intense sparks between Nathaniel and Camilla leave you completely breathless? If you loved this high-stakes mafia romance and want to uncover more thrilling underworld secrets, dangerous betrayals and jealous bosses who will do absolutely anything to protect the women they love, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this story with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more immersive audio dramas every single week. What should happen next? Let us know in the comments below.